Good evening, everybody. My name is Jody. I'm your moderator for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us and setting aside this time to discuss with us. I work for a company called Environics Research. We're the organization that was commissioned by the Toronto Police Services Board to undertake these public consultations on the topic of the job description for Toronto's next Chief of Police. Before we start our session this evening, I'd like to acknowledge that as participants joining together virtually tonight, we're coming together on land that is traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I'm hoping everybody's had an opportunity to find the functions on their Zoom, their use of Zoom this evening. And I will walk us through some notes and some information as we begin our discussion. I'm going to ask for the next slide on the screen, please. Can we move to the next slide on the screen, please? I'm also going to let everybody know that Environics Research is recording this session this evening, and that will be a record for us for our note taking. In addition, this session is being broadcast through the Toronto Police Services Board YouTube channel. So others may be watching on YouTube as our discussion proceeds. So the purpose of our session this evening, we've been commissioned, as I mentioned, by the Toronto Police Services Board to undertake broad public consultation to talk about the qualities and characteristics for the job description for the search for Toronto's next Chief of Police. There are going to be a number of opportunities, including tonight, to hear feedback from Toronto residents and stakeholder groups on this very important topic. We will be creating an evaluation framework that will be used by those who will be identifying, interviewing, and vetting candidates for the job of Chief of Police. It is not the role of Environics Research or any of the discussions that we are hosting over the next few weeks to identify, vet, or appoint any candidates to the role of Chief of Police. In addition, while we fully expect to engage in discussion about different issues and broader policy discussions and decisions currently before the City of Toronto, it is not the purpose of these conversations to be influencing those decisions that are being made. Go to the next slide, please. I just would like to quickly go through the agenda for this evening's session so everybody's got a sense of how the discussion is meant to unfold. We are currently in the welcome part and going over some of the terms of participation. Then we will get right into a discussion of the issues currently facing the Toronto Police Services, according to you, residents of the city. Typically in these sessions, we would plan to go into smaller breakout sessions so that in smaller groups we can talk about some more specific issues like characteristics and competencies of the next Chief of Police. I believe this evening we may have fewer participants, in which case we can keep the discussion in the plenary setting and everybody participate. I'm going to keep an eye on numbers, but so long as we stay perhaps under 20, then we'll stay in this broader plenary session and we'll talk here as opposed to breaking out. Then we'll be able to discuss as a group what we heard, what we enumerated during that conversation. We have a very quick polling activity, which will show up on your screen, and you will be able to vote on those priorities on the list that we create together. We have some time before the end of our discussion to talk a little bit more about the process by which Chief of Police is appointed and understand what's important to you as residents of the city. And then we will be wrapping up right at 8 o'clock this evening in recognition of the time that you set aside to be here with us. A few notes on the terms of participating in our session together this evening, and the same terms will apply to other discussions that we hold going forward. We're just asking that everybody limit distractions around them. Everybody's on mute, so hopefully it shouldn't interfere with discussion, but we're trying to keep an eye on all of the activity, everybody who puts their hand up and would like to participate in the conversation tonight. So the extent to which we can limit distractions is helpful with that. I hope everybody's had an opportunity to find the chat function in Zoom if you haven't used it before now. If you scroll on your screen, a bar should pop up at the bottom and you'll see a number of tools, including the chat. And that's where you can type in comments and feedback. It will become part of the record of this discussion. We are going to make every effort possible to call on anyone who puts their hand up and who would like to speak during this meeting. But in the event we don't get a chance to hear from you, by all means, please put your feedback into the chat and it will become part of the record of our conversation. We are excited to have you here this evening. We welcome passion in the discussion. We know that that means that this is an important conversation for people and the topic is important. What we don't welcome are personal attacks or any foul language being used during the course of this discussion. So we will be keeping an eye on that, and we will be removing people from the discussion who are not being respectful of others, whether it is people facilitating the discussion or anybody contributing comments. So please be mindful of that. We'd like this to be a welcoming and safe space for people to contribute their thoughts to this process. Your participation tonight is anonymous and voluntary. We've asked you to choose a screen name. It does not need to be your name. The use of video is completely up to you. It is not necessary when you're addressing the group or when you are observing and listening. So we leave that up to you. All of the information that we take in will be synthesized in the aggregate, and we will never be attributing any comments to anybody specifically or using any names or sharing any of that information. Anybody who would like to make oral comments during the conversation this evening, please note that your comments will be timed. We want to make sure we have time to hear from everybody who would like to contribute. So what that means is you'll hear a bell about a minute and 30 seconds into your comments if you are still speaking. And then at 2 minutes, we will cut you off so that we have an opportunity to hear from others. So that's just a warning about that. And finally, I mentioned this earlier, but it bears repeating. We are recording the session. That is so that our team can refer to that for our notes, but the session is also being broadcast on the Toronto Police Services Board YouTube channel, and I believe is also being recorded there and will be available to anybody who wishes to watch the recording after tonight. This is an opportunity if there are any questions from anybody on the process for this evening. We will be getting into issues and questions shortly. This is an opportunity to hear from you. We don't have much information that we are sharing with you. This is your opportunity to share information with us. So that is the point of the session this evening. So we will be opening things up very shortly for comments, but if anybody has any questions about any of the terms of the engagement or the process for this evening, we welcome that now. whether you want to put your hand up or put a chat into the put something into the chat. I see that Diana has entered in the chat and asked, how much weight will this hold at the end of the process? We are conducting a number of sessions, some of them with the public, some of them with stakeholder groups. All of that information is being synthesized and put into a job description for the chief of police. So, and the board has committed to applying that description to the search for candidates. So that is how much weight, that this is how the job description is going to be determined. Any other questions about the process? If anybody needs some clarity at this stage. Okay, if I don't see any hands up, and I will keep, I see a comment as well. I'm going to, another question that I'm wondering, what impact will this have on the role currently, Chief of Police? Can the role of the Chief of Police be put first? I'm not sure I totally understand the question. That what we are discussing in these sessions is what will go into the job description for the next Chief of Police. As you may know, Toronto Police Services currently has an interim chief, and this is the beginning of the process to find the new permanent chief who will serve the next term. So that's what it is we're here to do. Can we see what is it? Carla has asked, can we see what's in the current job description? We have some information on that, definitely, and we will get to that when we start talking about the characteristics and qualities we'll be looking for. So there will be that kind of baseline information to help everybody orient themselves in the things that are expected of the chief, and then what we will do, what the public will be advising in addition to those duties that will be required. So I don't see any other hands, so let's jump right into it. And again, I want to encourage, and I thank everybody who's using the chat. It's very helpful. We also invite you and welcome you to put your hand up, and we will unmute you and give you an opportunity to comment directly into the plenary this evening. So we'll move right into the discussion. And I'll let you know I'm doing my very best to monitor the hands up and the people in the session. So if it takes us a second to find you and unmute you, we are working to get to you. So our very first topic, and I like to start broadly in these kind of discussions, but we'd like to understand what are the issues facing Toronto Police Services right now? What are the issues that are on your mind and that ultimately the next Chief of Police is going to need to address? So I welcome, if anybody would like to put their hands up and you'd like to comment in the session, get us started. Or if somebody prefers to input in the chat. I see Carla has her hand up, and I'm going to ask Carla to unmute. And then I see Philip is next. So I'm just going to keep an eye on that. So Carla, you're first.
Thank you, Jody.
Thanks, Carla. Go ahead.
One of the biggest issues the police services face is a bit of a disconnect with the community. Well, a bit, to put it mildly. The police needs to reflect the community. The police need to be trained to better serve the needs of the community. So that the lack of training or need for more training, and the reflection, we need to see a police force that looks like Toronto.
Great. Thank you very much, Carla. I see Philip is next. Philip, do you mind going ahead with your comments?
Thank you very much. I would echo Caller's comment about training. I have been observing that there's been a tendency to move towards sufficient training as opposed to the best training. And training is often one of the first areas that's cut when budgets are being perused. So, for example, the use of simunition, I know that's no longer being used in use of force training, and I think that it's probably one of the better tools for that kind of thing. I think the concept of defunding the police should be more thought of as refunding, and it's a matter of interpretation. And the police cannot continue to be all things to all people. And so the new chief may need to have a vision or a plan about how he can stick to Sir Robert Peel's principles, which still are current and valid today, but divest those areas that don't necessarily need to be dealt with by police. And the last thing is, I think that for me, the new chief needs to have a solid business background, because he or she is dealing with $1 billion budget. And the deputies, in my mind, are the ones that would have the subject matter expertise, but the chief needs to be a business person who can manage and lead the institution. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Philip. I'm just going to add a couple of comments I'm seeing in the chat as well, so we make sure we get those in the list. I see police brutality against Black and Brown Torontonians, policing in communities of color. This problem has been generational and it needs to be addressed effectively. Another comment from owner: holding officers accountable for criminal behavior, fabricating evidence, withholding records, perjury. Accountability and transparency. Carla's added some more training about mental health issues, anti-racism, anti-oppression, trauma-informed approaches, training about gender-based violence, violence against women and children. Anyone else who would like to add to the issues that we're talking about tonight? These are the top issues that are facing Toronto's police services today, and the ones that ultimately will need to be addressed by a new chief of police. Sarah has her hand up. I'm going to ask you to unmute, Sarah, and go ahead, please.
Yeah, the biggest one I would say is the systematic racism, the institutionalized racism. To deal with that, that's the elephant of the room, which is the new chief, he or she cannot be using the pseudo anti-racism, which is very common right now in the Toronto police, and using tokenism whenever there's an issue within the African descendant or the Black community, using the tokenism at saying that they're resolving the issue. So that has to be addressed.
Great, thank you very much, Sarah, much appreciated. Obo has a hand up next. Obo, I've asked you to unmute. Please go ahead. Obo, no longer wanting to speak. That's fine. Other comments that have come into the chat, completely and broadly. Hello? Oh, hi, go ahead. Is that you?
Yeah, sorry, I had an issue with my mic.
No problem.
The issue is about trust. Most of our community, they are not trust our police anymore, because in terms of the neighbors or the area that they're living. And I'll give you one example. If a public doing anything wrong, it will be easy to be arrested and put to the court within 2 to 3 days. But if police officer do anything wrong, it will take years and years to be taken to the court or to be facing the justice. Those is something that they need to change, because it became a police vice public. Police, they get more easy way to just to show themselves they're good than public, which is the trust there's no trust anymore now. And that if we continue losing trust, it will be like our neighbors in USA. You see there is a lot of issue regarding police, which is we don't need that issue to be here in our city. That's my comment.
Understood. Thank you very much, Owo. I see Gordon has a hand up. Gordon, please go ahead.
Thank you. Not too much new to add, echoing a lot of what's already been said, but thought you might just want to be hearing, things that are top of mind for people. So, again, along the lines of dealing issues dealing with people with mental health issues. We've obviously struggled with that over the last number of years, dealing with systemic racism. Change management will be kind of key. Back to, I kind of liked that refund the force, because recognition that the force will need to change, and recognizing that services and budget currently provided to police might be best used elsewhere. So those services and the funding would go with it. Another piece, essentially around serving the community, the top issues serving the community versus the perception of, just looking after the force and, their fellow police officers. And of course, just an issue around just maintaining the integrity of the force. That's kind of around trust, and everyone feels that it is a safe place to go to. Anyway, those are my top things off the top of my head. So thanks for the opportunity to speak to them.
Thank you, Gordon. Much appreciated. And thanks to everybody who's using the chat as well. Lots of comments in there about mental health, as Gordon had just been mentioning, and mental health as well. Carla says the police force also needs support for their own mental health. So thank you for that comment. I'm going to not move us away from the topic, but just trying to address it from a different perspective. And again, welcoming anybody, put your hands up. We're a relatively small group this evening, so I'd like you to feel comfortable sharing your thoughts with us. Lots of space for everybody to participate, so we'd like you to enjoy that. Carla, there's no gender diversity in this specific position. We need to see a non-male identified chief. Okay, so that's, and we'll get into specifics like that coming up very shortly. I'm going to ask to go to the next slide. We're going to keep taking notes from your comments. What we'd like to do is just have you use some words, and we've talked about issues. But what words would you use to describe today's Toronto Police Service? What words come to mind? Again, hands up, put them in the chat. It's all very helpful and contributing to the record of this conversation. Again, if this is going to make its way into ultimately creating a job description for this role. So it's important for us to understand what the force looks like today. What words would you use to describe Toronto Police Service today? And I'm just scrolling to make sure I see hands up. Carla, go ahead, please.
Jody, just a clarification. Do you want us to describe the current police force or the current chief?
The service today. Yeah, thanks, Carla.
Okay.
Thank you for asking for that clarification. What words would you use when you talk about the police service today? What words would you use?
All right, I will be typing.
You're going to be typing, sure.
Yeah, I mean,
No
in
problem.
case other people want to talk.
We've got lots of time to hear from everybody,
Okay.
so please feel free
So
to.
I feel that the current force is unprepared for the job most times. I feel that there is a lot of biases. I think that the force is disconnected with the community, and there's so much opportunity for connection, and I think there is a lot of missed opportunities right now. I'm going to say it. There is, when I talk about biases, I'm talking about racism as well. That is a reality, and sometimes I think there is lack of understanding of the needs of the public, and lack of understanding. And I think it's because when I say unprepared, I mean, unless they get the training that they need, they are going to be unprepared for some situations. And I think the police often also feel misunderstood, but that's because there is not enough connection. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, they can be our neighbors, our cousins, our family members, right? But the reality is that right now, the police services are not seen as community members.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Carla. I see Sarah has a hand up. Sarah, please go ahead and let us know what words you use to describe today's Toronto Police Service.
Absolutely. Some of them already described what I wanted to say, but I will also add definitely miscommunication, lack of communication between the white shirts to the regular officers on the street. So there's literally no communication. There's a lot of cronyism and nepotism. And that includes also all the way from TPS with partners with certain outside organizations and so on. And lack of relationship when it comes to other city division to make sure that they're dealing with this gun violence and issues. So literally there's none, they don't exist on the table.
Understood. Thank you very much, Sarah. I'm going to read some of the things I'm seeing in the chat as well, just so everybody knows. Again, those are being captured, and we're trying to type and keep up with everybody here. But there is a record here. Some of the words that are being used: lack of accountability, corrupt, under-resourced. Nepotism, catching up with the times. I see Lily Kim typed that in. I'd be curious, Lily, I don't know if you'd like to speak to the group or maybe add some context to your comment in the chat to better understand what you mean by catching up with the times. I see someone else has, Philip has said integrity, increased diversity, also under-resourced. Distant, distrust. I see racism, untrustworthy, too strong focus on limited public perception, feel-good service. I'm just looking to see if anybody else has a hand up and would like to speak to the group on this topic. Naja, I hope I'm saying that right. I apologize if I've mispronounced that. Why don't you go ahead and please?
Yeah, yes. No, I just would like to add the way the police deal with youth, especially from the Black community. They are afraid to be stopped by police, even though they are not doing anything wrong. They know they're being targeted, and you know, they don't feel safe to reach out to police. So I think police needs to do a better job with youth on the streets, like, you know.
Understood. Thank you so much. I'm just going to let my colleague finish typing there, and then I'm going to move on to the next. So I'm just going to keep us moving because we still have ground to cover. The next question we have for you, similar, but looking forward now, and asking what words would you like to use to describe the Toronto Police Service 5 years from now? If you could choose some words and how you would like to be able to describe the service, or what you think would be a reasonable description of the service 5 years from now, what words would you use for that? Now, Carla, I saw your hand up earlier. I don't know if that was in relation to the previous. Oh, I see. Carla's added, at times it feels as though Black youth are being targeted. Okay, some comments coming in from the chat for words to describe Toronto Police Service 5 years from now: patient, understanding, trustworthy, diverse, compassionate, knowledgeable, accountable, progressive, advanced technologically, collaborative. Sorry, I'm just picking from when I see new terms coming in. Again, anybody who would like, if you'd like to speak to this, these words are very helpful. If anybody would like to explain why you've chosen the words that you have, why those are important to you when you think about the police service 5 years from now, that would be helpful as well. Not misogynist. So for women, violent crimes against women being taken seriously. Forward, approachable, welcomed in the community. Philip has his hand up, and I'm going to ask you, Philip, to please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just responding to your last request, and that was to speak to them. I did write some words in the chat, and in 5 years from now, I'm hoping that all of the things that we're all hoping for in this forum have come to fruition. And that's why they're all very positive type comments that are speaking to the way we would hope the service has become, even if they aren't there right now, that we'd be hoping to see in the future.
And are there some of them, Philip, that you had listed where you see direction, positive direction headed in that way 5 years from now?
Yes, that's correct, because I mean, the whole idea of a revisioning of the police and what they do and why they do it and how they do it, it's nothing new. The RCMP, when they used to be the Northwest Mounted Police, they had the same problem. It was a lot of Irish officers were not policing appropriately, and they blew that whole thing up and created the RCMP. Right? So there is precedence for this type of change, and it's identifying the visionary leader who can take us there.
Great. Thank you, Philip. Anybody else who would like to add to this list, this discussion? Dealing with physical and mentally impaired with empathy, I saw that. I see more comments coming in. Thank you very much. They're not different in accountability, skill, and ethics than any other public or private individual or organization. And I realize I'm reading these quickly, and I don't want my colleague to be sweating because, again, we've got this all captured in the chat. I just wanted to share these in case people aren't looking at the chat. Carla has her hands up. Thank you, Carla.
Okay.
Sorry.
So,
Go ahead.
So there are limits to what the chief can do. The chief is one person, and the police force are, thousands, right? There needs to be a plan to educate, to train the police officers, to screen police officers, because we need police officers who are not who don't have a criminal mind. Let me put it this way: police officers who are not biased, police officers who are psychologically healthy, right? And that you cannot put this all on one person. So as much as this is about the new police chief, I think there has to be more than just replace or have a police chief with particular skill sets. So the whole system has to be reviewed, evaluated, and transformed.
Okay, great, Carla. Thank you. So it's maybe not just about one person, but a look at the force overall. Let's move on to the next slide, because I feel like we're ready to start speaking about specifics and what we're looking for in that role. So there was a question earlier, and this is a broad response to that question in terms of what is the role of the chief? What does the chief do? So, and I'll read this out. And obviously there are more details around this, but this is a good summary to give us something to chew on and react to as we think about the qualities and competencies in a person who's going to deliver on these roles. So, and some of these have already come up in our discussion tonight. Effectively manage $1 billion annual budget that centers communities, innovation, data, and technology. Prioritize, develop, and nurture partnerships with a broad spectrum of social service providers, law enforcement agencies, health sector organizations with focus on mental health and addiction services, community organizations and leaders, and government, leveraging these partnerships to collaborate in the development of innovative programs rooted in community policing. Have a deep understanding of the myriad and complex challenges facing policing organizations internally and externally, including strengthening member wellness and engagement, and increasing public trust and legitimacy across communities, particularly those that are vulnerable, marginalized, and disaffected. And lead both the frontline and uniform and civilian support staff to ensure the TPS is a sought after and positive place of employment. So very, very broad description of the high level responsibilities of the chief. But what we're here to do this evening is go beyond that and talk about the characteristics, the qualities, the traits in the next chief that not only will help address these roles, but also address the issues and the concerns that this group has already raised this evening. Moving us from the words we use to describe the force currently, the service, to moving it to the vision that we shared for 5 years from now. So as I mentioned earlier, typically at this point in the discussion, we would break into smaller groups, but because we are a smaller group this evening, we'll just stay together in this plenary. We don't need to use the Zoom abracadabra and go off into these smaller groups. I really would like to encourage everybody to participate. This is really the important part that is going to inform the kind of advice that we share back with the board. So I'll just go to the next slide and give you a little bit of context on what it is that we plan to do. So again, that was these were the instructions that were going to get us into those smaller groups, but we'll be spending the next about half hour together, focusing specifically on the qualities, the traits, the characteristics that are going to describe the next chief of police for the city of Toronto, who's going to be positioned to address those issues that we've been talking about tonight. So again, we're going to try to keep up with your suggestions, encouraging you to use the chat, but also to please put your hand up. I'd like to ask you to, when you offer a characteristic or something, if you could explain why that's important, and we'll take note here. And then we will be able to organize these, see if we come up with some themes and the way they work together. So again, please feel free to use the chat, but we also invite people to put their hands up and offer some traits, characteristics that we can add to the list here. I see Owner has a hand up, so I'm going to ask you to unmute and go ahead. And Philip is next. My Owner, are you unmuted? Okay. I'm not sure that's going to work. So let's go to Philip, and Owner, if you sort out your audio, we'll try again.
Thank you, Jody. I think it's already been mentioned, but I guess it should go here. Business acumen. So the idea that the new chief should have some kind of business, possibly credential, or at least deep knowledge. I mean, they're running $1 billion budget. it's the deputies that should have the subject matter expertise, but the chief needs to navigate the political and the business end of things. So there is an argument for lateral entry. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's come up through the ranks in order to fulfill that position.
Okay, thanks, Philip. So business acumen. Owner, let's try again. I see you should be unmuted. We've asked you to unmute. That doesn't, I see you're off mute currently, but it doesn't appear to be working. Maybe try the chat if that's not working. I saw Gordon had a hand up. Gordon, are you still there with your hand up?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Gordon. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to kind of build on from the previous slide as well. It was what I found is like, I thought that was a reasonable description of what the job is. So I thought that was good around the what, but it didn't really get to the how they want to do the job. So I'm not too sure, and I know I'm just speaking for myself, but when I looked at that, I kind of thought that seemed like a reasonable thing to do. It seemed like all the right words, but we know we're not happy with our, well, we're not terribly unhappy with our police service, but we certainly know there's room for improvement for sure. And what I think we seem to be struggling with, and I know I'm struggling with, is how, how do you do these things that we want you to do? How are you going to be better about serving the community and feeling welcomed in the community? And like, what's different about that? And I'm not too sure how we're going to get there.
Can I ask, Gordon, can I ask, is there a characteristic or a trait that someone has that positions them to address the how that you're talking about?
I don't know. I guess the first word that comes to my mind, and I'm, again, I haven't thought about this before we're speaking live here, is like empathy, like trying to understand what's going on with a person, like as the police chief, but you need to lead, and to lead, you want your officers to do the same thing, to have empathy for the situation that they're dealing with and what the best way, everything's not cookie cutter, and he or she will need to lead similarly, that, you need to listen and not think you always have the answers, listen to other answers. But I think empathy is kind of a key one, at least what I'm thinking at the moment.
Great.
From my perspective. But as I said, I kind of thought what the job is seemed reasonable. We just don't know how to do it. And I don't know if anybody else has a different perspective on that.
Okay. I see Diana has a hand up. Thanks very much, Gordon.
Thank you, Jody.
Diana, you go ahead.
Sure. Thank you very much. I was just listening to the previous speaker, and I'm going to make an assumption here based on listening to the previous speaker and also the names of the various participants. And I'm sure I'll be off a bit, but I don't think I'll be off a whole lot. I am involved in this plenary session, forum, whatever it's called, consultation, because of lived experience and as well as my education, my training, being born and bred in this city. I identify as BIPOC, and we know, because this has been publicized, discussed ad nauseum for probably at least 10 years, if not longer, that the biggest problem with the police is how the police interact with BIPOC Torontonians. In particular, Black, Brown, and Indigenous. I don't think anybody who can read, listens to the media in any form, or talks to people about problems in society is unaware of this. So I would like to just put out there that I'm thinking that a lot of people do identify with being BIPOC, and the issues that are hurting, killing our communities are the ones that most people speak to and feel passionate about and hope to be heard and seriously addressed, because this is ongoing for years. It seems like we have these discussions, these panels, these meetings. these trainings, and very little gets done. I don't see, and I have never seen in my many years on this earth, white on white crime, meaning youth. I've never read in a paper a white young man shooting another white young man. That's just one example. I've never heard of white young men or those who do not identify as BIPOC not being able to, if they work towards it, of course, choose the path they do, their career, whether they want to be as high as a CEO in a multinational or a prime minister, et cetera. We know what the barriers are that are hidden and unhidden in the systems that allow youth to make the choices that they choose to do, provided they work for that. Obviously, you have to work for what you want. People do not get promotions, people get deterred, people get lied to, people get menaced, and this is ongoing. So I'm hoping that most of the people here are people who have been negatively affected over generations from the police, never mind the other systems that are at play, because that's another conversation. And I'm hoping that the people who do not identify as BIPOC will sort of step back a bit and think about what they're saying and think about the voices that need to be heard and acknowledged seriously. This doesn't happen every day. This doesn't happen every week. This doesn't happen every year, where BIPOC people living in these communities can actually speak up to the institutions that can make effective change. This is the time to do it. We're in Black Lives Matter. We're in a pandemic. I really, really hope that people who are privileged will step back a bit and allow other voices to come up who are negatively impacted by it. So I just wanted to put that comment out there.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you very much for those comments and for the comments you've added to the chat as well. And I want to trying to keep up with the chat and some of the other qualities and characteristics that we're talking about and being aware of that are important in Toronto's next chief of police. Things like managing the system but leading the police force. Police aren't above the law. The police chief needs emotional and cultural attunement. So maybe a sensitivity there. Thank you. Let's go back to hearing from people. Sarah, I see your hand up. I'm going to ask you to go ahead, please.
Thank you. And thanks for the other participant who mentioned that. So for me and myself, I'll be straight up. We represent, I'm the co-chair for the Black Community Consultative Committee. And I'll tell you what one of the characteristics when it comes to chief, and we deal with it, is chief has to have that, I'll go straight up and say, not a lapdog for the TPS board. I'll be honest. What's happening right now is majority of the chief, whatever the TPS board, and for people who don't know, TPS board are public civilian, AKA city councilors sitting down, including the mayor. So if we're going to be electing a proper chief, that they are able, yes, to listen to the board, but at the same time, the biggest ones that they need to take advice and listen to is the community that are impacted. And right now, the elephant in the room is the community being impacted is the Black community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. Carla, you've got your hand up. Go ahead, Carla.
Well, there's much has been said. Well, I just put a question. Do we have a diverse board? Do we have a diverse police board? That's one question that would be very important. I put down that the police chief would need emotional and cultural attunement. Those are skills that are critical for emotional intelligence. We need a chief that is able to be aware of the power he holds and the power the force holds, that is able to support the community, that is able to. I don't know if you're gonna have another BIPOC chief. I am a BIPOC person myself. If we don't have a BIPOC chief, that this chief is able to live with the fact that yes, we don't know everything about everybody's culture, but that comes with curiosity and empathy and openness to learn.
Yep.
Right? Curiosity is critical for any position. And I also put there that the chief needs to manage systems, and that's why it's important for him to have someone else already put it to have business acumen, because he needs to manage systems, but he needs to lead his people, the force. He needs to be a leader, right? And you can't manage people, you can lead people. I think a lot of what I wanted to say, I think Diana has said it. It's really critical that we do not ignore the elephant in the room, and that we have a board that is not only going to hold the chief accountable, but it holds itself accountable. That they need to look at themselves. Are they diverse? What are some of the strengths that they bring to the board, and that can be passed down to the police chief? That's all I'm gonna say for now. I'll keep typing, because I realize we have other people as well that may want to talk.
Thanks very much, Carla. And thank you for everybody for both the chat and for your comments. This is very helpful, and I know my colleague is working really hard to get it all on the page, although we do have it in the chat, so I don't want you to worry, because that is being captured. I'd like to ask a question of the group, and that is, does the next chief of police need to be somebody from the city of Toronto? And you can put that in the chat, or if someone has something they'd like to share and put their hands up. And I appreciate people who are saying yes. If you wouldn't mind telling me a little bit more about why that's important, that would be very helpful for us as well to understand. Is that something that's necessary? If people can come from different jurisdictions with different experience, or does it have to be specific to the Toronto context? I'm very curious to know if that matters to you, and if that's something you would be looking for in the next chief of police. So Lily has said in the chat, the character of the city is unique in Toronto. It's not like other places, so it's important that they be from Toronto. Others have said yes, it's very important that that the next chief come from Toronto. We've had a few people weigh in with that assessment. Sarah said it was less important. It shouldn't matter. Same as it doesn't matter to be from a particular ethnicity or gender. Someone who will do the job. So I'm curious, anybody want to comment on that? Put your hand up. Carla's got your hand up. Go ahead, Carla.
Okay, so this is a non-negotiable for me.
Okay.
The chief doesn't have to be born in Toronto. I'm not even talking about ethnicity, but the chief needs to have the pulse of the city. No, he needs to be knowledgeable. He or she, they need to be knowledgeable. We are a diverse city. We are a completely different beast, right? We are a diverse city. Can you imagine someone coming from a place that is not diverse at all? What kind of problems we're going to have? I mean, if we are diverse and we have problems with our current force, can you imagine having someone who is not knowledgeable of diversity, who doesn't experience diversity in their day-to-day?
Okay, so that's the characteristic. They need to be knowledgeable about diversity, or have experience.
And it's not about reading about it, it's living it. It's living it. Who do you associate with? Who comes into your house, right? It's none of those chiefs that, oh, I have Black friends. None of that. I have gay friends. None of that, right? You need to walk the talk. You can't just read this in the books and think you are diverse and knowledgeable. Sorry.
Okay, great.
Sorry for the passion there. It's just like, yeah, no.
Passion is welcome.
And yes, and it matters. It matters who you are, because if it didn't, we would not be having this issue or problem.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for that, Carla. Anybody else who'd like to weigh in, whether it's on if they need to be from Toronto? Is there another quality or characteristic on here that you'd like to talk about, something that might be missing? So we see business acumen, empathy, understanding, someone who's familiar with the pulse of the city, someone who's able to manage the system. Diana, your hand is up. You'd like to add to this list of qualities we have here? Sorry, I thought I unmuted you, Diana. Let's try that. No? Okay. Okay. We have a number of qualities and characteristics on the screen, and I'm just scrolling around to make sure I'm not missing anybody who's got their hand up and would like to add anything to the discussion now. Sarah has your hand up. Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, I'm gonna mention a few things. Yes, it might not matter, or it matters since I'm hearing a lot of people matters. But here's the reality things. We may have had chiefs before who were from City of Toronto. Has anything changed when it comes to the oppressed? And again, the main thing is the tokenism. We gotta be careful. When it comes to our community, tokenism hasn't done anything. It means nothing if the chief, maybe from Toronto, and is unable to move or make a difference, or is afraid due to reprisal or moving forward. Because at the end of the day, it is the board that selects who the next chief is. And if you know the board is not diverse. It's city councilors that have been sitting there, God knows for how long. They're the ones that are going to select who they want and who likes and who's going to move their agenda forward. So just wanted to put that out there. Okay, thank you. I think just for reference, the Toronto Police Services Board is not only city councilors. There are other members, and you can learn about all those members by going to the website to see that. But I just wanted to clarify that. But I'm not. So people may want to go and determine whether it feels like a diverse group or not. But we understand from your comments that diversity, not just in the service and in the leadership, but also in the lay leadership in the board, is also important coming through this discussion. So thank you for that. Diana, let's try again with you. I saw your hand up.
Okay.
Oh, there you are. Okay, go ahead.
It was my fault. Sorry.
No worries. Please add to our list here.
I just was hearing a bit, but also in the comments earlier, a recurring sort of leitmotif of financial accountability, able to manage a big multi-billion-dollar budget, et cetera, which is great. But I was just thinking, just to float this out there to everybody, because this is such an important forum. Mm-hmm. If we had everything else we wanted in this potential chief, but the chief was weak on a multi-billion-dollar budget, would we let that slide and allow his department within the Toronto Police Services, his financial, whatever it's called, to deal with that and bring things forward and then, explain to him or her what it means and where you can cut and, what the communities are looking for? Let his experts around him coach him in that and concentrate on what the city needs. Because I kind of feel that the financial management thing is not the biggest thing. I mean, if they're kind of weak there, well, I really don't care. They're not going to spend they're not going to spend crazily. They have people around them that are trained, CAs, CMAs, et cetera, to do these things.
Sure.
So I'm just thinking, if we had just about everything else, could we let that slide?
Okay. So somebody who can build a good management team around them, it sounds like, Diana. I saw Natasha, you have a hand up. Please let us know what you're thinking about the qualities and characteristics. Natasha, are you able to unmute yourself?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yay, finally.
Well done.
Sorry, that was me on the other computer. So I would like to say, I mean, in 2010, going back, we had the G10 and everybody saw what happened, and that should never happen again. And that's something that I think we need to learn from, of how to deal without having brutal force and just kind of martial law.
Mhm.
You know, so that's something. I mean, we want to be known as a world-renowned city. We don't want to be known to the dictatorship. And as long as the police, I don't know if other people are aware or not, but at Sharby Express, the thing is that there hasn't been any accountability.
Okay.
And
So accountable is important
that's
to you, Natasha.
something that well, it's not just if you could have a trusting relationship, like with me and my car mechanic, there has to be trust on both sides. And if the police want trust with the community, they have to earn it, is what I meant.
Understood.
Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. Thanks to everybody for these really thoughtful comments. This is really very helpful. We've got a full screen here. I think what I'd like to try to do is organize these a little bit and see if we can't pull them together into themes, because they're some of these may be similar, and my colleague Victoria, who's working so hard behind the scenes to keep up with all of your comments, is going to do some magic for us and move some things around. Some of these characteristics I might, and I welcome anybody to challenge or to clarify as we try to organize and arrange these. If we're doing it in a way that doesn't capture what was intended in your comments, by all means, please put your hand up and we welcome your clarification. And some of these may be more what you might refer to as kind of harder skills, whether it's business acumen and knowing how to balance a budget, some of the softer skills, being trustworthy and empathetic, having the pulse of the city, so being aware of the things that are particular to the city of Toronto and what's important here. We heard diversity come up a lot, being aware of the need for diversity at all levels. So I'm looking at some of these, knowledgeable of the diversity of the city. Oh, you seem to be doing a very good job of organizing these. You don't even need me. If anybody's got any others that you think belong on this list, makes sense, getting organized by theme. I wonder if that piece about the board, working with the board, does that fall under management roles and just kind of the independence of the chief? Carla, you've got your hand up. Why don't you help us clarify here?
Sorry, no, I wasn't trying to help you with that one. I really would like to see, I would like to see trauma informed in there. And
sorry, say trauma informed.
Trauma informed.
Okay.
And it's not just because the chief or the force needs to understand how trauma impacts people, but how it impacts themselves, right? So a trauma informed chief will pave the way for a trauma informed organization. The board needs to be trauma informed as well. And if they don't know what it means or how to become, you know what, we are here to support. We can train the police chief, we can train the board to become trauma informed. I think you guys are doing a good job at putting the words together. You don't need me for that.
We're trying. Thank you. If anything here doesn't make sense as anybody's looking on, please let us know. I'm I'm taking a look at this as well. Yes, some of those softer skills there in the middle, trustworthy, empathetic, the accountability as kind of a theme when it comes to knowing and understanding the city's communities, and how to engage with them. I didn't hear a lot, and I apologize if I missed it in the chat this evening because people were typing all kinds of stuff. Community engagement, where does that, how is that an important quality or characteristic? I haven't seen that that come up. I don't know if somebody wants to comment on that or whether that belongs on this list. Sarah, oh, Sarah said yes, community engagement. Diana, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
So I know that's one of those, what's the term? Not bites, but one of those recurring words that is used to mollify and to pacify communities of colors. That, community engagement, community whatever unit, it hasn't worked well. I can tell you as a teacher that some schools in the Toronto District School Board have, first of all, a new police station right across the street, which is very threatening, in an elementary school, and also police in the schools doing afternoon little interactive games and little activities. And it's very traumatizing because whether the children are aware of it or not, because they are children, they are not even teenagers. These police officers that identify themselves as much, that, have their uniforms that they get into after they engage with these kids, remember these kids, know the school they volunteered at. And these kids, because they're kids, they're innocent, they are trustworthy, they are naive, and they look up clearly to these police officers volunteering at lunch and during certain programs. But when they get older and they hear of things, or they're inadvertently pulled into something that they're not really responsible for, or they start to find out what's really happening in the communities of color, they start to feel that, was I going to be targeted? Or I used to like that police officer. I recognize that face and that name in the media. It's very unnecessary to have police volunteering in elementary schools, period. Because really it's so hard to criticize and to find fault with them because kids are innocent. They would naturally look up to positions of authority. And I think it's unfair that somehow over the past few years, whatever, city council, whomever, have been able to, have these police officers volunteering. I think it sets a very dangerous precedent. I also think it's unfair to the communities because, you have all this power and they're pretending to be your little friend, and aren't they cool? But then they have lethal force that they can pull out at any moment, because they're having a bad day, or they're, they're patrolling a certain area, or, things happen and, they have the full protection of the police force behind them because they always have. And then things happen that should never happen. It's almost like you're setting youth up in these communities to be surveilled by police later on. It's just wrong.
Okay. Thank you, Diana. Thank you for sharing that. I wonder if Gordon will let me pick on him. Gordon, you had added in the chat, do the right thing, even if not popular with police membership or political leaders. I'm wondering if you would be willing to expand on that a little bit, either in the chat or in discussion, so we understand where that belongs in terms of these qualities and characteristics.
Sure, for whatever it's worth. I just thought, a lot of what we're talking about is making sure you do the right thing, whether it's dealing with the community with mental health, race issues, anything. You want them to do the right thing, even if it's not popular with their own force, right? We need leaders to lead, not just kind of say, okay, where do you guys want to go? Where does the force want to go? And I'll go there. They might need to do things that are not as popular with their own force, for the men and women of the force. They might have to lead them in a direction that doesn't come naturally to them. So
Mhm.
we want them to do that. And similarly, the political leaders for the city of Toronto, they might want something to look something, but they might, whoever this new chief will be, will need to, say yes or no if it's the right thing or not. It's hard to do that, but I think that's what we're going to need to do if we really want the change that we all envision that we want.
Understood.
So that's kind of what I was meaning. Does that make sense, Jody?
Absolutely. I think Victoria's trying to keep up with you there on the screen. I think maybe what I'd like to do, because we have a pretty comprehensive list now, is what we'd like to do is just a polling exercise. So we've summarized these, and we have some other themes that just came up in earlier conversations, and they're very similar to what we've been hearing here. And we'd actually like to ask you to prioritize, because at the end of the day, some of these things are going to be more important to us than other things, and we understand that the way you make those decisions is for each individual in this conversation. But we'd like to, we're researchers, so we always rely on things like polls to summarize the numbers for us and tell us what's really important to people. So I'm wondering, Victoria, if we can't go to the next slide and set up our poll that we're going to see, the options that we'll see on the screen when we enable that function, and people get to vote on what is most important to them. So we've seen themes like, and I'll go through the list I have here, a change maker, somebody making change. Someone who's introspective, reflective. A strong communicator. So something that didn't come up in our discussion, but I'm interested to put on the list to see how it relates to other priorities. Tough on crime. That we didn't really talk, I mean, we talked a lot about leadership qualities, and we'll make sure those get into the list. But that didn't come up specifically. Someone who's representative of Toronto's diversity. So that was definitely important. Somebody who's trustworthy and honest. Let's say accountable to communities. I'm just trying to count. Carla has your hand up. Yes, let's talk about tough on crime. What does that mean to you? Let's.
Jody, you walk right into this one, huh?
Okay.
Okay, tough on crime. If we're not careful, this will be another situation where we will be looking at issues without context, right?
Okay.
Tough on drugs, tough on crime. These are very, how do you say? These are situations that are, if you're not careful, it's where you're going to keep repeating the same type of oppressive practice. Because if you come in with the mentality that some communities are just criminal, or are just the communities that practice certain things that you consider to be criminal,
yeah,
we are going to be in a lot of trouble.
Okay.
And we have seen it play in Canada, in the United States. If you criminalize certain behaviors, and you don't have an intersectional analysis, we are going to be in trouble. We want someone that has a good awareness of what the political, the social, political, and economic context of this country and this city particularly. We want someone who is not going to hide behind assertions like, I'm going to be tough on crime, I'm going to be tough on drugs. The war on crime and the war on drugs are tools that have been used to oppress many people. So I wouldn't want to. I would want to see a chief that is asking, why is there crime, or why are these activities happening, rather than not have analysis. And I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm making myself clear or
No,
not.
you totally are.
But
And Carla and other people.
It's a trigger. It's a trigger for me. Yeah.
Thank you I really appreciate you calling that out and clarifying that, and others in the chat are supporting you with that. I guess my question to the group then is what is the characteristic, what is the role, how do we articulate, is it a focus on public safety? What is the right way?
Yeah. Someone who upholds safety and who's a safety planner, great, fine, because there are ways in which you can do that without criminalizing people, because you know what, the system criminalizes certain communities in the name of being tough on crime. And I just want to make sure that we are not hiding behind words like this to continue to be racist, to continue to be homophobic, to continue to be misogynistic, to continue to be oppressive, right? So I just really want to make sure that we are going to another direction.
That, Carla, thank you so much for clarifying that. That was very important feedback. And
remember when using pot was a crime? Using pot is not a crime anymore.
Right.
But how many people, how many BIPOC people are in jail because of using pot? Right? And how many non-BIPOC are in jail because of using pot?
Right.
So it's very relative, and we just have to be very, very careful.
Okay, understood. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
I want to keep honing our list here, because we are going to ask everybody to vote. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'm just trying to think in terms of what was on. Do we have transparency here? I think we want transparency. 9. And we said representative of Toronto's diversity. I'm just, can we flip back to the previous slide so I can just see that and recall the important, okay, we did accountable to the community. Did we put business acumen? Make sure we keep something like that on the list that we're going to be voting on. Let's put that on, because that came up a few times in our discussion. And I think we're at 10. We don't want to overwhelm. So I just want to check with my team that we've been able to program these. Please pick emotional. Let's see. Can we put trustworthy, does it make sense to everybody to put trustworthy and honest together, and then we'll put emotional and cultural attunement as the 10th quality? And I apologize to my team, who I know are making edits behind the scenes to make sure we're all set up. So I think we've got our 10. So I'm going to ask the tech crew if they can please put the polling. You should see a poll show up on your screen. And I'm just waiting to see that. Oh, we have 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are on the screen here. Change maker, introspective, strong communicator, accountable to communities, representative of diversity, trustworthy and honest together in one. We put them together. Upholding public safety, transparency, business acumen, and then the 10th is emotional and cultural attunement. Oh, we had, yeah, let's take out, we don't, yes, we had in a previous list someone who was a member of the Toronto Police. We didn't really talk about that, so, but we did talk about being from Toronto, so thank you for the feedback there. So let's go ahead and launch that on the screen. Hopefully everybody can see that on their screens right now. We're going to ask people to choose your top qualities. We usually ask people to pick up to 3. We realize these all came up in discussion tonight, but now we're trying to get down to what's really important. So pick the ones, the top 3, top 2, top 1. Maybe there's one that really stands out for you. What are the most important for Toronto's next chief of police? We'll leave that poll open, and I'm just watching to make sure everybody gets a chance to vote. We'll give that a minute. And once we've got everybody in, we'll get a chance to see how our voting. I'm going to ask you to pick up to 3. Just because we're looking for people to prioritize, because obviously all of these are important and we've had really robust conversation about them this evening. But if you had to pick your top 3, what would they be? Diana wants to go to 5. If you must, Diana, if you can't, limit it to 3, 5 is okay. We're really trying to get a sense of what's the most important to people. So we're still waiting for a few people to have their say. This is an important have your say part of this exercise. I'll give you another 30 seconds so people can make their choices, and then we'll get a chance to see what that looks like. From the list that we created, some we brought to the discussion, many you contributed to the discussion. What are your top qualities or characteristics that you want to see in Toronto's next chief of police? So we're just about there. We'll give another 15, 20 seconds, and then we're going to share the results so everybody can see how that, how our group, and this will be different in all the groups who we have this conversation with, and that's what's so interesting about this process. All right, when we hit 3 minutes, we'll close the poll. We're at 2 minutes and 57. we're going to end the polling now. And we're sharing the results. Everybody can see the results. So the one that seemed to come up the most was the change manager, change maker, 58%. Emotional cultural attunement was also very popular with 50%. Thank you, Carla, for advocating for that on the list. Accountable to communities, being trustworthy and honest came out near the top as well. I'd like to ask if you chose change manager, change maker among your top three, would someone share with us why that was in your top three and just explain that to us a little bit? That would be great. Either in the chat or put your hand up. Philip, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Thanks. The reason that I chose that one was the idea of police can't be everything to everybody, and the idea that they need to divest themselves of activities that don't require police expertise. So, for example, if you have a mental health crisis where the person is not a danger to themselves or others, why do you have to have a police officer there? That kind of a thing. It should be divested. And so that change maker would be someone who can envision that and make it happen. And I just want to mention, I can't see the top ones on the poll. It starts for me at someone who is introspective.
Oh, maybe we can move it on your screen a little bit. I think you can move that box. I think you've got control of it. So hopefully you can scroll it down a little bit.
I see your point. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Philip. Anybody else, whether you chose change maker? Carla says a change maker will not be afraid to make changes and will embrace change. So that's important. Understood. Anybody else who picked that in their top three who want to share why that was the case? Why was that important to you? If anybody'd like to put their hand up and share that with us, or put it in the chat, I'm happy. Needs to be unafraid, Diana says. So a change maker is someone who is unafraid to make change. Natasha prioritizes empathy, not fear. All right, thank you so much for that feedback. That is really very helpful for us. I want to move on. We just have a couple of other topics, questions we wanted to ask of you and opportunities to hear from you before we wrap up this evening. So we'll just stop sharing the results. I saw some chatting earlier, and just to provide a little bit of clarity and then get some feedback from the group on the process by which a police chief is appointed. So in the case of the process that we're in now, and this is the first time the board has undertaken as broad and comprehensive a consultation as we're doing right now. So we're in phase one. So the board contracted with Environics to conduct this consultation and understand the qualities that are and the characteristics that are important in the new chief. So that's where we are in this process. The board has also appointed an executive search firm. And when this process is over, that search firm is involved in looking for qualified candidates based on the job description that comes out of this process. So they open up and look for candidates. In addition, interested candidates are able to apply for the position based on the job description that is provided and matching their competencies and qualities to what's being sought. The board then shortlists and interviews candidates from that pool based on the best matches with with what is in the job description, and then finally the board appoints the successful candidate as the next chief of police. So that's a high level view of the process of appointing the next chief of police. And we were hoping to spend a little time getting your feedback then on the next slide to understand how you feel about that process. What questions do you have about the process? What else do you want to know? What should be shared with the public through this process? What do you think is important for the public to know? So we'd like your feedback on these things as well. Diane has asked, is the executive search firm Mandrake? No, it's not. It's Boyden Canada. You can see that information on the TPSB website. The board's acceptance of that, of Boyden's submission to take on that role is on the website. Carla says she hopes the interested candidates have the same opportunity as the ones who were sought after. Carla, I see your hand is up. Why don't you tell us some more about?
Okay, here's my concern with who people who are sought after are most likely people who are in certain circles, right? So we may have someone who's very qualified and up to the job, but is not on the right, sitting at the right tables, sitting on the right circles. So I don't like the idea of a firm going after some people, searching for people, where are they searching, right? So, and why do we have two different ways of applying for this job? Why not have one way? If you are interested, you apply for it. And then this executive company can go over the resumes and maybe short list, a few that the board can look at. I don't like the idea because that's where the friends become, really attractive to this job. Or let me put this friend or this person that I know that runs in my circles. I don't like that at all, honestly.
So you have a concern that the executive search firm, somehow that makes that easier for those people?
So where are these people? Where are they looking at? This executive firm, where are they going to be looking or searching for the candidates?
Why not? I don't have an answer.
Yeah. Okay. Why not have a process where all interested people, apply and let their interests be known, and that's how they should go.
Okay, so Carla, are you concerned that in what we described here that there isn't ample opportunity for the people who are interested to also throw their applications into the
I'm afraid that one will have more pull than the other. That's my concern. That those who the firm brings, the company brings, are the ones that are going to be mostly looked at.
Okay.
And I don't know where this firm is going to be looking at. Definitely not. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you for that, Carla. Sarah, you've got your hand up. You go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. And this is why I said it from the beginning, and I'm still kind of echoing over and over. It plays a big role knowing how the system works for a lot of the public individuals. And again, TPS board, as I stated before, and also Jody, you reiterated, it is by city councilors and also appointed by the provincial, members. So yes, it's going to be selected by handpicked, chosen. That's why I said the accountability, transparency, nepotism, cronism plays a big role. So at the end of the day, when it comes that the board's going to select that, who's it going to be? Is it going to be ones that are chosen by the public? If it was anything to put in, what should we be shared? Is the relationship the TPS board have with the candidates selected. What I mean by that, if these individual candidates have worked in the city of Toronto or have been counselors or they're partnered with certain firms and organizations, you already know it's handpicked and hand selected. So again, even being honest to the community right now, even to the public, it's not transparent. So this is another, as I say, I just don't want to be the Debbie Downer, but reality is a facade. At the end of the day, the board is going to select who they fit to be the next chief. Thank you.
Okay. Sarah, can I ask before I lose you, how does the public getting involved in the selection, the way I thought I understood you referring to it, what does that bring that you feel is missing from the process the way I described it? Are you able to, I have to ask you to unmute.
Oh, there you go. Again, right now, the TPS board who are sitting there, if people don't know, are counselors. So as a citizen or a public, I have to either become a politician or I have to be a friends with the premier or the ministry that's running. Right now it's the Conservative Party. So they handpick and select certain so-called public members. It's not public. I'll give you an example. One of them that they just put in right now, it's coming from TDSB. And another individual is from a not-for-profit organization. It's all public knowledge. Everybody can go in and find out the process. It even tells you the pay, the pay amount and so on, which is taxpayers' money. But again, it comes down to the selection process. We may be putting our input right now, Jody, and you're taking a lot of great information, which is fantastic. At the end of the day, it comes down to the board, who they're going to be picking. That's the reality.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And the purpose of this process is to give the board some direction based on public feedback for making that selection. So that's the idea of this part of the process. I'm curious about what people are interested in knowing about this process. Are you interested in knowing more about this process? Excuse me. What else do you want to know about this process? What would you be looking for throughout this process? Natasha wants to know, why can't we elect the chief? Okay, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. Currently, because that's not what's in legislation and how chiefs are put into that, but that doesn't mean that's not a question that that can't be asked for sure. Is it a role? Maybe that's a question. Is it a role that's appropriate that people should vote for? Does the public know enough about these people to vote for them, to put them in that role? Okay. And Gordon says the U.S. has elected judges and sheriffs, and that doesn't seem to be doing a good job for them. Okay. And Philip, only interested in knowing more about the process if you had an ability to impact it. So Philip, can I just pick on you for a second and ask for you to expand on that a little bit? Beyond what the input you're having now, what is holding you back from wanting to know more about this process?
It's a matter of not having any ability to do anything about it. So even if I know more about the process, if I don't have an ability to affect some kind of change, then all that would do is frustrate me, because it's great. Now I know more about the process, but I still can't do anything about it. So
okay. Okay. And how do you feel about the what we're doing today and this opportunity to have a say in the process?
I think this is wonderful. I think that there's great synergy that's occurred here. I've enjoyed listening to the perspectives of the various viewpoints. I mean, there are a lot of different perspectives that have come forward here, and I can appreciate all of them. And I appreciate having been given an opportunity to present my voice as well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Philip. Thanks for having been here. I'm just taking a look to see if anybody else has a hand up and wanting to contribute. Any thoughts on what should be shared with the public through this process? What does the public need to know what's important for them to know. Natasha says everything. Okay. What, Gordon, you've got a hand up. Go ahead, Gordon.
Could you just move back to the previous slide for a moment? I wanted to see
the process slide. Yeah.
Yeah, board contest. Yeah, so it looks like, I guess for me, it seems to boil down to, how does the board make the decision and what sort of governance and oversight do we have? So if the board is the key piece, it sounds like we really have concerns around the composition or transparency of the board, right? Like if we had a lot of trust in the board, we would probably be fairly comfortable with that process, more or less, versus, given the other things we've talked about. But it seems like, blah, 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 goes into a black box and they choose a new police chief. And so that transparency is always a challenge, but, you don't want every little decision, that could be annoying and hard to do. But the flip side, though, boils down to trust and understanding of what the police services board is. And I know it's, I'm not as informed on that as I should be. So shame on me. I'm embarrassed by that. But I think that's where maybe we go to, that's our challenge, is we don't know if we trust them to make the right decision. And that's all I wanted to say, because I didn't remember everything that was on that slide. So thanks for the opportunity.
Understood. Thanks, Gordon. Thank you for contributing that. Lily has said on the chat, the public ought to know the basis of decision making, which determines the outcome of the shortlist. Okay, so even knowing to the shortlist. And yes, Gordon doesn't need to be ashamed about what you know or don't know about this process. It's wonderful that everybody's set aside the time to participate this evening and contribute to this discussion. So there's nothing to worry about there. We really do appreciate your input in this process. And we also understand that in a lot of processes, a lot of public information is made available that people don't always take advantage of that information. So it depends on the issue and what's important to you. And it's clear tonight that this is an issue that's important to the folks who are here. So thanks again for that. Anything else that should be on this list or that we should be thinking about in terms of what's important for the public to know? What else do you want to know? What's going to help build trust for you in this process? Just taking a look to see if anybody's got a hand up. Anything else we'd like to add? All right, maybe what we'll do is we'll head on to our next slide. We have one more question to ask of everyone. What role does ethics play in this process? Ethical behavior, this is from Lily in the chat. You mean the ethical behavior of the candidates? Just looking for a little clarification on that. Whose ethical behavior? Oh, I see that Victoria's picking up on some other comments in the chat too. I'm trying to keep up with. Need to create a matrix. Well, and in fact, that's what we're working on here with these discussions and what goes into that matrix. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So what we want to kind of wrap up with and understand from you is when this process is over and a new candidate has been appointed to the chief of police, how are you going to know that that is the candidate who was the most qualified according to the different traits and characteristics and qualities that we've talked about here, what are you going to be looking for in that new chief to know that that the appointment was based on the feedback that that you've been providing? Carla is interested in the 3 top picks. Sorry, from the polling that we did, Carla, or the 3 top picks of candidate? What do you mean by your 3 top picks? Oh, so like the short list, wanting to know who the short list is. Natasha wants the chance to elect the candidate. Carla, you've got your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Okay, so maybe the 3 top picks, maybe it's not possible, but I would be interested to know who else was considered, right? Because not just the final person, but who else was considered.
Why is that important, Carla?
Because if there are other people interested and they have applied and the board chose the one with the least qualities that we have, we as in people, not we in this group, have chosen, something is wrong with it, right?
Mm.
So I think since this is a public process, you know, they're asking for a feedback. This information that you are collecting should be made public. This is what the people of Toronto have picked as the characteristics for the new chief. Here are the candidates that we shortlisted, whether it's 7, 3, and here's the person we picked.
Mm-hmm.
So that is transparency, because otherwise it's if the people of Toronto don't know what the people of Toronto picked, right? Because I don't know what other groups are saying.
Mm-hmm.
So this information, is it going to be public, your findings?
Yes. Yep. This gets shared with the board. Yeah.
With the board. Is it shared with the rest of us?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Amazing. So then we're going to look at that, and we're going to look at the chosen person and see if there's a match.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to know their resumes, because we may not, I mean, hopefully they will be talking about the qualities and the experience of this new person, so that we can see whether it was worth our time, because it's not just about getting feedback from us. It has to be meaningful, right? Because there's government and you know, whether different departments are always asking for feedback, but then you don't see it in the outcome. So I just want to make sure that that this time it's, you know, that it's not just about, you know, saving face and showing something that is not, that this is really going to be making a difference, because we need it. We really need it.
Understood. Thank you, Carla. Philip, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I can appreciate what Carla was just saying. However, if you were one of the people that was running and didn't make it, I have a tendency to think you wouldn't want anybody to know about that. Like, let's say you were one of the, say 3 of the 4 deputies all ran for the position of chief and didn't get it. Now it's publicly known that you wanted that position, you didn't get it, and it could cause a lot of political angst. Not to mention if they wanted to then go on for another position with another service, and they say, oh, you didn't make it in Toronto, so you're coming here now, right? It's just that side of the coin.
Okay, understood. Anybody else? Any other thoughts on how you're going to know that the candidate chosen is the one who demonstrates the qualities and characteristics that we've been talking about? Diana, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I did put it in the chat. I'm just speaking to Mr. Semple. I'm just wondering, Mr. Semple, were you or are you a former TPS board member or former police officer or anything related directly to policing?
Sorry, Diana, I'm just going to ask you to, if you have comments that you want to add to this, this last question that we're asking. I don't want to put anybody on the spot this evening.
Okay, well, that's fine. I appreciate that. Just asked a simple question. I identified myself as a teacher and having lived experience, but that's fine. I appreciate that. There was nothing menacing or sarcastic in my question, but that's fine.
Okay.
So I'm just thinking, the Toronto Police have gone through an somewhat open process for the next chief, and as I put in the chat, it was between Slawley and Saunders. So it has been done. That's the precedent. And the thing is, I think most of us here, from what I'm hearing and seeing, want as much transparency as possible. And that's not so much for reasons of, I don't know how to say it, of wanting to up the status quo or wanting to get back at the status quo. Far from it. In fact, it's totally opposite. It's our opportunity as best we can, the people who are most negatively affected by it and have been, as I've said before, for generations, to address this. We are an international city, a huge city. As has been said before, we're a very, very diverse city. You cannot, as a government institution, municipality, invite people to your city, to your province, to your country, welcome them with open arms, give them, here's how you become a Canadian citizen, here's what we do, we'll give you this free, oh, come over here. And then when they get here, or they put their time in, or they've proven themselves in their job, there's this invisible wall that they can't break through, and they don't understand why. We know this as BIPOC people. It's a gut feeling if it's not in your face. We're in the 2021s. It's not always in your face. It's far more sophisticated than that. In the 50s, it was in your face. I can talk about stories of my own mother and the other generation where, you couldn't even rent a place in Toronto because you appear Black. So, it's more sophisticated, it's more underground, but it's a gut feeling, and we all know what it is. So, this is about transparency, and this is about finally making transformational change in a system that is most hurtful to BIPOC people.
Thank you, Diana. Thanks very much for those comments. And we're just capturing them there. Gordon, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't have too much to add, unfortunately, because it looks like it's a really difficult thing to do, because even if you voted it, like, how much attention do we all pay when we vote for things? I wish I paid more attention. But to me, it still boils down to the trust in the Police Services Board. So if we're somehow able to up our trust in that would be cool. But again, that's still that big black box to me that I don't know what's happening inside of it. And the other part would be, so if somehow we felt more trust in that grouping, we'd have more trust in their decisions. And then if we have some of that trust, that as a foundation, then, they just need to communicate to make sure we know why they thought whoever they're putting forward is truly the best person and is going to do well for our city. That would be great. None of us kind of want, the challenge, and I'm maybe not remembering properly, but the Doug Ford OPP had, a few years ago. Time is elastic. Sorry, I don't really remember. It could be last week or 5 years. Joy of COVID. But, that wasn't a transparent. There wasn't trust in the process. There wasn't anything. So, they have to have trust in the board. They have to explain the process they went through and why that seems good, and communicate the heck out of it. That's my 2 cents that I went on far too long. My apologies.
That's great, Gordon. Thank you so much for that. And I'm just keeping an eye on the clock, and we're very close to the end. I'm so very grateful for those of you set your evening aside to be part of this conversation, whether it was putting your hand up and contributing to the discussions, whether it was through the chat. And all of this is being captured, of course, for the record of our conversation in our recording, but also if anybody wants to view it later, I believe these will be available through the Toronto Police Services Board website, where where you can view the recordings. I also want to just go to the last slide because there's a URL there. There will be a survey available as well. We understand that not everybody is available to come and participate in a discussion like this. So for those who couldn't make the time this evening or who prefer not in a group setting, but still to have the opportunity to give their feedback, the Toronto Police Services Board will have a survey online where you can go and add further thoughts and comments. Sorry, just to clarify, the recordings for this and the other sessions that we'll be having with the public will be available on the Toronto Police YouTube channel, not the police board. That was my error. So youtube.com/Toronto Police is where you can find it. Again, I just want to thank everybody for your candor, for your honesty, for your willingness to be brave and offer your thoughts on this, to correct any comments or misunderstandings we had on our end. This is all very important because ultimately this is going to get synthesized to represent what we heard from the public. So this was all very, very helpful. I just want to, Natasha's made a comment. We're not in a position to email these recordings. You'll need to go to YouTube to find the recordings, but that's where you can find that. And again, I want to thank everybody for your time this evening, and hope you have a great rest of the evening, and be well and stay safe. Thank you all very much.